Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, Council, Administration, members of the public who have joined us today. I would like to call the regular Council meeting for February 15th, 2022 to order at, we're early, 1:29 p.m. I feel it's okay to be early because everyone's here now. It's 1:30. Council, you have in front of you this week's agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda? I see no hands. Do I have a councillor wishing to make a motion to approve today's agenda? Councillor Kelleher-Embee, all in favor? You also have in front of Councillor Melnick. Oh, you're also in approval, in favor of approving the agenda. Excellent. You also have in front of you the minutes from the regular meeting of February 1st. Any additions or corrections to those minutes? I see no hands. Do I have a councillor wanting to make a motion to approve the minutes? Councillor Waxer, all in favor? Minutes are approved. We have no business arising from the previous minutes, so I will move on to agenda item 5, request for decision. Item 5.1, the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Master Plan for 2022 to 2026. I think I'll pass it over to Bill, who might.
Very brief introduction. Deputy Mayor Hall, Council is very familiar with the plan. The plan is here after going through committee and has received some updates as a result of the feedback at the committee meeting. Some of those textual changes have been made in the document. Lisa Riddell and her team have provided those updates in the document here as amended and is ready for council consideration for adoption.
Hello, good afternoon, Deputy Mayor Hall and all of council. Last week at Committee of the Whole, you heard in more detail about the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Master Plan that's attached. The plan is the culmination of 18 months of collaborative work between Municipal Inclusion Committee members. The draft plan, if adopted, would form the basis for how the municipality of Jasper will realize the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion policy over the next 5 years. The first part of the plan includes details on why this work is critical, the principles that will guide our work, the ED&I policy statement, our shared commitment, and responsibilities of elected officials and administrative staff. The second part of the plan outlines the implementation, and there are 14 areas of focus. So last week, there were some excellent points that came up, and I've incorporated each into the draft that you see here. On the cover page, we've replaced the Alberta Municipalities logo. On page 4, we've replaced the words business units with departments. On page 6, we removed the word tolerance. And on page 25, under area of focus 15, which is about measuring success, we've added items C and D. So C focuses on ensuring that there's a clear schedule for reporting on plan implementation to council. And item D will ensure that the CAO receives a recommendation from the Inclusion Committee and how to incorporate an inclusion lens into the request for decision format. Thank you all for those suggestions. This work is ever evolving and we will continue to add or tweak things as we learn more about best practices in the field of advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Riddell, for all your hard work. Any comments from council? Do I, Councillor Waxer?
Just, I appreciate the quick inclusion of all of those comments from last week. I think we have an amazing document. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waxer. Is there a councillor wishing to make a motion to adopt this plan? Councillor Waxer? Do all councillors understand the question? I will then call the question. All in favor? That motion is passed. Thank you again, Ms. Riddell. It's a beautiful document.
Thanks so much.
Moving on to item 5.2, engagement invitation for a PPSS training study, or sorry, transition study. I believe this one is quite straightforward. Are there any questions from council? No, I don't think so. Is there a councillor who would like to make this motion? That Councillor Melnick and Councillor Waxer. I said that right. Attend to this. Councillor Kelleher-Empey.
I make the motion.
Thank you very much. I will call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Okay, moving on to 5.3, paid parking resident exemption program. I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Given.
Sure. Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Hall. This recommendation from committee comes as a result of the 2021 paid parking pilot project and the wrap-up report, which recommended go forward action. Council previously endorsed the program parameters and had set aside the concept of a resident exemption, which was one of the recommendations, to determine exactly what form that exemption would take. The committee reviewed that discussion last week, and as you'll see in front of you, the committee is recommending that council approve a resident exemption program with preloaded credits for any resident registered in the system to a maximum of 500 credits or 500 hours per year. Again, I think the RFD that's in front of you is unchanged from its original presentation to committee, other than the change reflecting the committee's direction to council. Administration had assessed a number of different approaches, and you'll see our administrative assessment of the level of customer friction, the potential for revenue generation, the level to which an alternative encourages walking, and our perspective on administrative workload in the RFD. We have a table where we rated 3 different alternative exemption types by number of hours, by preloaded credits, or providing no exemption to residents, and really assess those 3 different alternatives on the scale of high, low, and medium. So the report is here for council discussion again, acknowledging that the committee has made its recommendation that the system be based on preloaded credits that equal to 500 hours, I believe the intention was, per year. Deputy Mayor Hall, with that brief introduction, I'll leave it to council for discussion, debate, and administration is here to support any answers to questions that we might be able to help you out with.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Demota.
I do have a quick, I think it's a combined question here. And so I'm about delivering service with the least amount of headache as possible, right? So the question I have is, considering both the 2-hour free option and the 500 credit option, and strictly looking at it from administrating either, which would provide the better service and greatest return financially for the municipality and the community? Sorry, through you, Deputy Mayor, to Mr. Given, please.
Well, thanks very much, Councillor Demota. So administration again attempted to do that assessment in a table that is included in the RFD. In terms of customer friction, we assessed the lowest level of customer friction being in essentially the 2-hour free parking for residents, because there would be no need for residents to tap in or tap out when they park. They could simply park and walk away from their car and then ensure that they're back before the 2 hours is up, which in our estimation would be the lowest level of friction for customers. With respect to revenue generation, obviously there being no limitations. I mean, you could park for 2 hours, an hour and a half in one spot, and then move 5 feet down the road and park for another hour and a half. So there really would not be any revenue generating potential from residents in that case. So it has the lowest revenue generating rating, again, from administration's perspective. And also from the administrative workload, the only interaction that administration would need to have in setting up the program would be to handle the initial resident initial resident registrations was where they let us know what is a resident car. Once we've done that, then there'd be no recharging or refilling of credits or tracking of credits when somebody's low, or indeed notification to them when they were low. The preloaded credits, just to make sure that it doesn't appear that I'm putting my thumb on the scale in one direction or the other. The preloaded credits system administration really saw as a middle of the road approach. There would be the potential of revenue generation, although I think it's questionable if it's 500 hours of free parking. That's quite a bit of free parking, and I'm not sure if people would run through that and then need to recharge their credit wallet or begin to pay for parking. But administration did identify that depending on the number of credits provided by council, that there is a greater opportunity for revenue generation. And I suppose rather than sort of restating it, I'll just say it is the opposite in our view of the 2-hour time limit, because it does require a resident when they park. I mean, if you have a system that says you have this much money to spend, credits to spend, you have to be tracking how many you've used. And so that would require the user to pay, even if they're paying with our council provided credits. So there is one additional step for users, and that's why administration rated it as a medium customer friction. And in terms of administrative workload, we saw that as medium as well, because we would have to inform residents about a program that does have more steps. And again, this is in administration's view that number of hours was really a single step process. Come in, register your vehicle once. With respect to the preloaded credits, we would have to inform residents about those multiple steps. And anytime you're trying to educate the public about a program that has more than a single step, there's more education that's required. And that education effort is what we assessed as contributing to that medium administrative workload. Ultimately, the system is flexible. That is the benefit of the digital first. If we were in the old days and council was discussing how many quarters we should give each resident, that would be a different matter. Thankfully, we're not there. And so even if it is a credit system, it is all digital credits, and we can work with the service provider to upload those so that every resident that registers automatically receives that in their wallet, their quote unquote digital wallet for use with parking. So it is not a high level of friction, certainly, but there is those added steps, which is why administration identified it as a medium admin workload.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Demoto, do you have anything to add or to Mr. Given's response? Go ahead.
Well, I have enough information in front of me to make a motion and then debate it, but I'm not sure if Councillor Wilson had further questions or if he was about to do the same. I didn't want to.
Councillor Wilson?
If I may, yeah. I'll just jump in there with a quick question. Forgive me, I wasn't here in attendance at the committee of the whole last week, and I just wanted to quickly ask where the 500 credit hours came from. Was that just kind of an agreement amongst councillors? I believe it's a great starting point, and I like the flexibility of it. I just was inquiring, how did that number come about?
Yeah, so administration recommended the different alternatives. Council through committee chose the amount.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall, and good afternoon, everyone. I thank you for having the opportunity to speak to this motion. The 500 credits, which we determined to be hours, was a suggestion that was put out in the last meeting. And the reason I suggested that 500 credits for residents was appropriate is that it gave residents the ability on average to have 2.7 hours per day at their discretion for the 184 days that this would be operating. And that's where, when we talk about flexibility, This allows residents to manage their parking. We're assuming that a resident will come downtown and need 2 hours of parking. A resident, on some circumstances, may only require 15 minutes or half an hour. This allows them to use the appropriate amount of time for on-street parking. And then if they choose on another occasion to park for 5 hours, they could park in one of the lots, because there is no restriction as to the number of hours, and pay for those 5 hours out of their credits. So we're giving the residents the maximum amount of flexibility. We also still have the 2-hour maximum limit for parking on Patricia and Connaught, and as well now Geeky. So what we've done is we've said to the residents, here's your time. This is the reason this was proposed, is residents can then go manage the time as their lifestyle suits them, because some days they may need to be downtown, other days they may not, and some days they may need 8 hours of parking in a public lot. I see this as a far more flexible, user-friendly solution for residents to be able to enjoy the free parking up to a limit. The 2 hours in one spot and moving a car, and 2 hours in another spot, and was not really flexible, user-friendly for either administration, I feel, or the residents. Residents can plan and choose where they're going to park for the purpose that they have for that particular trip. The idea is that residents will choose to walk, bike, or perhaps carpool in order to maintain the number of credits they will need to get through the 184-day period. I certainly believe this is more than fair in this first year of going with 60 or 6 months of parking. And it'll allow our residents to understand the value of parking as well. I'm sure that there will be administrative challenges and hassles. I'm not going to minimize that. There will be some challenges with bylaw. We recognize that. But I do feel that this gives the opportunity for residents to participate in this paid parking program in such a way that they can manage their personal lifestyle.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. I'll go to Councillor RCMP and then I'll head to you, Councillor Demota.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. Through you, Deputy Mayor Hall, to Mr. Given. My question is that last year, when we brought out the paid parking, one of the challenges was our seniors that don't have smartphones. Will they be able to have a pass set up on the credits? How are we going to work with the people that don't have smartphones? We know a lot of seniors do, but there's quite the older generation that don't. And I was wondering, how are we going to work with our senior population to help them?
Thanks, Councillor RCMP, through Deputy Mayor Hall. At this time, administration hasn't settled on that. It's something that we would do in collaboration with our parking service provider. That may be a bit of a challenge because, again, if the system is based on credits, the person would need to have a quote-unquote digital wallet to hold those credits, and they would need to have an interaction with the system to start to use them. So again, if I can sort of use the analogy, the old sort of system of having a bag full of quarters, with the credit system, council is giving everybody a bag of quarters, and they still have to plug the meter though. If we translate that to this digital system, we've given them the quarters that they hold in their cell phone, and then they need to use their cell phone to plug the meter. And so you can appreciate that does present a challenge for users or seniors without a smartphone. If council passes this recommendation from committee, administration would work with the parking provider to identify how we would do that. But it is fair to say that it is not as straightforward because there is that need for there to be a account set up that is attached to an individual user, and for that user to choose to use 15 minutes of parking or an hour of parking or 5 hours of parking. They need to actually interact with the system in some way to do that, because we won't know necessarily how long that vehicle has been parked in any one place unless the user interacts with the system. Again, administration will work with our parking provider based on whatever direction we receive from council, and we will figure out some kind of system, but it is not likely to be as seamless as it would be for a resident with a smartphone.
Mr. Given.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Demota.
Thank you. Yeah, if no one has any further questions, I'd like to put forward a motion and then have debate on that and see where it goes. And then
I see Councillor Waxer's hand popping up. Do you have a question, or?
I can wait for the debate.
Okay. All right. So having heard all that I said, that I've heard, I would like to propose that be it resolved, the council approve a resident exemption from the paid parking for up to 2 hours per parking session for any resident registered in the system. So, and the reason I'm putting forward this is because we've heard from administration when it comes to friction. I believe that the last time when we rolled out the pilot project, we could have set ourselves up better for success when it comes into community buy-in. And I'm totally for exploring a credit system in the future. But, part of the reason why I voted for a $3 parking fee on the street as opposed to the parking lot and having different rates there is because of the demand on the parking there, as well as I wanted residents to be able to park there. So for the same reason, I feel like we should have some type of revenue tool where we levy money from visitors to help compensate the residents here, because the residents pay a lot in taxes for so many things. We have to oversize things like the sewage treatment plant, to be able to field all that stream that's coming in. So, when you put it into that concept, and then we're broadening our pilot program from last year to having a greater responsibility for the staff that are patrolling the area. So they're going to have to monitor the parking lots as well. And when we're adding another component to the actual physical makeup of the software to be able to track residents, I think we're adding too much extra work in one shot. So, I think that with what administration proposed is a really good step into moving towards something else down the road. But for now, I think from my point of view, this is a good first step. So I'd like to hear from everyone else and then close off.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Waxer, did you wish to? You had your hand up.
From my I've been thinking about this a lot, and parking in the central business district is a precious and finite commodity. And I have no desire to burden residents with new fees. But at the same time, I'm concerned about making it easy for residents to drive downtown in peak months when just maybe we should be incentivizing those residents who are able to walk, ride a bike, carpool, or even skateboard to their downtown destinations. Starting to shift our thinking and behavior in this way will yield myriad benefits for our individual health, benefits for the environment and climate change, and benefits for the municipality being able to maximize its revenue generation in that peak period. If the municipality is able to do that, that would surely benefit all residents. So I would be in favor of providing a smaller credit or only a daily 2-hour limit, but for parking downtown in acknowledgement that we all have reasons sometimes to be driving downtown. But those are my thoughts at this moment.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Any other debate from council? Councillor Wilson.
Forgive me again for not being present last week, but this motion sounds very similar to a motion that I think was a tie vote last week. I think maybe the only change is that registering in the system is a requirement. Yet again, I think that still the problem still remains that how do we decipher the 2-hour parking period? You know, if you just roll your car into the next parking stall, and then you get an extra 2 hours. I think there are flaws with this motion as well, unfortunately, but I am still more in favor of the credit system. I think it's a bit more flexible to start with. I think as Councillor Melnick had explained, it teaches residents the value of parking. I think it does start the conversation with residents. Of course, I don't think it's really going to affect residents too much with 500 credit hours in the first year, but at least it starts them thinking, it starts them participating in the program. And just to go back to Councillor Killerampi's comment on seniors, and I think accessibility, I'm sure administration could incorporate something that I think we had last year, whereas seniors could apply for a accessibility pass and then may be able to be exempt as well. So I think there's ways to work around that, but I do still support the credit system more so than the 2-hour. And yeah, that's all for me.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other councillors? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. I won't repeat what I said before. I will not vote for the motion that's on the floor. However, in discussion last week, I did make the comment that if there are individuals that who have challenges with technology, that administration do is exactly what they did last year and work with those individuals that could be identified, that this is a resident who may or may not be tapping in for reasons that administration will determine. Unfortunately, I won't support this motion, but given the opportunity, I would make the motion later as presented in the recommendations. I don't disagree with Councillor Waxer that in maybe future years, we could look at that credit after this year where people have learned how to use it and maybe reduce that credit, that it's not as large as a 500. Or at the point that we get to the vote on this motion, there may be another motion where there may be a friendly amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Any other councillors wish to debate this? I will weigh in here quickly. I too support a credit system over a 2-hour per session. I do agree with Councillor Waxer in the fact that it really feels like we're making it really easy for residents to drive downtown. And I know there's always exceptions. I know we all have to drive downtown at times, but I also want to make it really exciting and awesome for people not to drive downtown and to ride their bikes downtown. And I think a credit system gives us a lot more flexibility than a 2-hour per session. 2-hour per session, you can drive and park downtown for 3 hours. Sometimes they don't check all the time, head home, come back downtown, park for another 3 hours. We spent 2.5 hours last week debating the price of these parking stalls. And I think we want to really maximize that revenue we can bring in. Anyone else want to weigh in? I think it would be Councillor Demota now. You want to close debate?
Yes. The argument of credits that doesn't provide me enough evidence that it'll deter people from commuting into the downtown core. I think that we need to develop a buy-in and slowly work towards getting some social understanding of the benefits. I felt like the last time around, residents felt like they were getting something shoved down their throats and they were being told how to operate within their own community. And I think this is exaggerating that. I don't want to be telling residents how they should be going into town right now. I think we should develop some social norms programs to better understand why it's beneficial to them. Now the question was, how do we administrate the 2-hour scenario? Administration said that their ability to monitor and work with the 2-hour system, it causes less friction and less administrative work. So the question was, how do we administrate that? Well, I'm going with administration's recommendation on the way they believe is the best practice for administrating that. And that was the 2-hour program. So they're the ones on the ground, and and it makes sense to me to go with what they recommended for this year, especially. Again, because we've got a broadened expansion of the program. So the resources are going to be limited in working with a credit system. And it doesn't make sense to me for this year, at least, to implement an extra load on what they have to do on their already busy day-to-day dealing with tourists. And if anybody's interacted with tourists in the last few years, you know that there's it needs some extra special skills from people working on the streets. And I think that they've been doing a great job, and I don't want to burden them any further. So I'm going to stand with my proposed motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. There is a motion on the table. Does everybody understand the motion? Do we need Councillor Demota to repeat it? We're good. Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? 5 opposed. That motion is not carried. Councillor Melnick, I know you were willing to make a motion next.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. And I appreciate the debate, and I appreciate the conversation that we had. I think it's healthy, and I'm hoping that that individuals understand that this decision was based on a lot of robust conversation and consultation. But I would like to put forth a motion that council approve a resident exemption program with preloaded credits for any resident registered in the system to a maximum 500 credits, which is 500 hours per year for the 2022 paid parking period.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. I will open the floor to debate. Councillor Kelleher-Ampe.
As much as I'd like the residents to be able to go about their business as simply as possible and less work in administration. Comes to you, Deputy Mayor Hall, to you, Councillor Melnick, would you accept a friendly amendment to that to add that any senior that is not, or any person with disability that does not have a digital phone and that cannot participate in working with the electronic system, that they can work with administration to get a pass for their car?
I would accept that friendly amendment, and thank you to Deputy Mayor Hall, to Councillor Kelleher, and I'll leave that to Deputy Mayor Hall to determine if administration understands a friendly amendment. I understand it to be administration working with anyone who has challenges due to technology for the 2023 year.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall, and thank you, Councillor Melnick.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to debate Councillor Wilson.
I appreciate the friendly amendment, Councillor Calrampi, and I think admin will be able to. There has to be some parameters, I think, that they'll be able to build in because technologically challenged or just not caring to participate in the system. I think we'll probably be able to highlight that pretty quickly within admin, but it will be a challenge, I think. But again, I do support the friendly amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any other councillors? Councillor Melnick, do you wish to close the debate?
Deputy Mayor Hall, thank you. I have said everything I need to and look forward to the vote.
Excellent. There is a motion on the table with a friendly amendment. I think administration understands it. We all understand it. I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? There is one opposed, and that motion carries. Moving on to item 5.4, garage suites. Mr. Given, I will pass you the mic.
Sure. Again, thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Hall, and briefly, Council, as this was at committee last week. Committee is forwarding a recommendation that Council endorse the concept of garage suites, subject to their exclusive use as residential accommodation. Briefly, Council will know that Parks Canada has forwarded draft garage suite regulations to Municipal Council for comment and feedback. At the committee meeting, administration identified a number of different municipal operational perspectives that may be of concern. At the committee meeting, committee gave direction to administration to work on a couple of specific areas with respect to emergency access and wastewater provision, and to work with parks to identify opportunities to address those concerns. So administration has started those discussions with parks, and we do have a meeting with them later on this week, to discuss how we could identify those concerns in parks permitting process, and we can come back to council with additional information on that. This recommendation is essentially council's official response of whether or not they're in support of garage suites. And if council is in support of garage suites, I think that qualifier at the end, which I think admittedly is broadly understood by the community and by Parks Canada, but I think worthwhile for council to be on the record that the intent of garage suites is that they are for regular residential accommodation, not nightly accommodation or PHA use. That issue is raised in the administrative report that is attached here. But again, the committee directed administration to undertake some work that is already happening with Parks Canada. This motion came forward to council, so the council would be on the record as being in support of the proposal. The next steps from this were council to pass the motion. Administration would continue our work with Parks Canada and would likely identify opportunities to regularize the system. If there were any outcomes that needed council input or oversight or approval, we would be back to committee and on to council. But likely with this motion, if council is giving direction that it endorses garage suites, administration will find a way to mitigate municipal operational concerns in collaboration with Parks Canada and through their permitting process. And we would intend to just support the development of garage suites and get that system, work with Parks Canada to get that system up and running.
Thank you very much, Mr. Given. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in full support of garage suites, although Mr. Given, you suggested that regulations have been supplied, but really only draft drawings. I am concerned about giving the green light before or wholehearted support without seeing the actual draft policy. And I think that council should be involved in that as well. I just wouldn't want to, wave the go-ahead flag and then just leave it there. So I'll let other councillors weigh in, but I would be willing to make the motion, but with the caveat that council to review draft policy before full commitment of support. You know what I mean? Because when we got the letter, I think it's suggested that well, the letter is here, but that the draft policy would be available within a few weeks, but it has been a few weeks since the original correspondence, and we haven't seen anything further. I know they've suggested that they're waiting to hear back from us, but I'd still like to be involved after this meeting.
Deputy Mayor Hall, if I can, just with respect to the draft policy, I think some of that policy, I would hope that some of that policy will be informed by the operational considerations the municipality has there. And I will pick some examples that are really only hypothetical. There may be a certain lot width that may make more sense, or actually a certain laneway width that may make more sense. Or there may be lanes that have additional barriers that don't exist in other lanes that might lend a certain type of property to having garage suite or not. There also might be constraints in terms of water and wastewater. One of the first things that administration wants to do is to ensure that any approval process considers water, wastewater capacity. We don't, unfortunately, today have at hand detailed information on the water capacity at every individual lot. And so conceptually what we're thinking is working with parks to identify a way to get that information as a part of their permitting process. And all of those types of operational considerations and how we would build them into the process are likely the types of things that would inform the parks policy on garage suites. So fair enough that there may be another step to come. I think that is absolutely possible. If there were two different motions here, maybe that would be a way to handle it, because I think I'm hearing Councillor Wilson say that there is support. He's certainly supportive of garage suites. I haven't heard anybody suggest that they should be anything other than residential accommodation. Perhaps the additional one would be direction to administration to return with a draft policy to a future committee meeting. And so that would give administration the direction to work with parks, and that the next step before the go flag is waved on garage suites, that council should have an opportunity to see the draft policy and provide comment on it as well. So that could be a separate motion, because I think it ensures that it doesn't suggest that council support for the council support for garage suites is qualified in any way other than the residential accommodation side, but that council does have an expectation that it will have an opportunity to comment on the draft policy prior to it being released and approved by parks.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any councillors wish to make one of those two motions or both motions? Councillor Wilson and Councillor Waxer.
Councillors, before I make the motion, were there any other questions? I just wanted to make sure I wasn't jumping the line. Well, then I would be pleased to make the motion that council endorse the concept of garage suites, subject to their exclusive use as residential accommodations.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I will open the floor to debate. I see no hands. I will call the question. All in favor? There are none opposed. That first motion is carried. And Councillor Wilson?
Is that okay, Councillor Waxer? I think that you did, yeah. Okay, well, yeah, then I would also make a motion that council direct administration to return to council with a draft policy of for garage suites to a future meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do you want to return to a future committee meeting or council meeting?
Committee would be more appropriate, I think. Yeah.
Okay. I'll open the floor to debate. I don't see any hands. The question is on the table. Everyone understands the question. All in favor? There are none opposed, and that motion is also carried. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Moving on to agenda item number 6, correspondence from information from Sergeant Badazy. There is a letter attached to our agenda. Mr. Given, do you wish to speak to that?
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Hall. And I just will check my participants list. I'm not sure if Sergeant Badazy is here today. And I know that Director Nadon is not here. So I can just speak briefly to the letter. This is a part of regular communication that Council will be seeing regularly on a quarterly basis from the RCMP detachment. It does in the plan highlight a number of statistical measures and trends where Council can see where the community is trending on different types of provincial crime statistics. And so that's there for Council's information. Really is, I would suggest, one of those things that is there for Council to assess and kind of see if we're generally headed the right direction, or if there's something that starts to be a concern, that you would see those trends and have an opportunity to raise them. The other thing that I would point out that the letter contains is first that the detachment appears to be fairly well resourced. They do have a table that shows their staffing, and at this time they're showing only one hard vacancy, as they term it, a position that does not have an employee attached that needs to be filled. And so I think that that is an improvement over last time, and they're recommending that, or suggesting that there's that they will be fully staffed. The other thing that I think is important to bring to Council attention is that Sergeant Padesi is planning some community engagement as a part of the RCMP's required annual performance plan. And so the Sergeant is proposing to start some community engagement, which I would imagine Council will receive additional information about over the coming weeks. With that, Deputy Mayor Hall, this is here for Council's information. And if Council saw fit, a motion to receive for information would be appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Melnick, do you wish to make that motion?
Just prior to making the motion, and I'm hoping that Mr. Given can perhaps give us some insight. I'm going to refer to agenda package page 64 for the benefit of everyone. And this is the page talking about crime statistics. And the one figure that really stood out was provincial traffic code, not just for the quarter, but for the year, doubled. And I don't know, Mr. Given, if there's anything that you can comment on regarding that. But it is interesting where the detachment was down a number of officers, but handled twice as many provincial traffic code violations, if I'm reading the stats correctly.
So, Deputy Mayor Hall, to Councillor Melnick, while I can't comment in detail, my immediate reaction would be to make the observation that we're comparing summer of 2021, which was a much more open summer than the summer of 2020. And so it is likely reflective of the increased regional visitor traffic that was coming through the community. So I would hazard a guess, and Councillor Melnick, it truly is just that. I have an intuition. It is actually a reflection of increased volumes. There are just more people coming through Jasper in the summer of 2021 than there were in the summer of 2020. And that probably led to that increase. Certainly administration could take that away and confirm that assumption with Sergeant Padesi to see if that's correct. And we could follow up with you on that.
Thank you, Mr. Given.
To you, Deputy Mayor Hall, thank you, Mr. Given, as well. I would, at one point, make the recommendation, but I'll allow other councillors to comment.
Any other councillors wish to comment on this correspondence? I see no hands. Councillor Melnick, are you ready to make a motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. I would make the motion that council receive the RCMP quarterly report for information as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Questions on the table? Everyone understands the question. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. On to agenda item 7, other new business. Is there any other new business? I don't see any hands. We can move on to agenda item 8, our motion action list.
Deputy Mayor Hall, the motion action list is presented here for council's information, just to ensure it's regularly tracked. Obviously, at committee meetings is where we go through it in detail and approve any changes to the motion action list, but the desire was to have it attached to council meetings as well, just for people's information. Gives you a little bit of an insight into items that are upcoming. I will say to council that in terms of our committee agenda next week, you should expect that it will be a fair amount of time on an item that's not on the motion action list. We earlier promised that council would have some opportunity to be engaged in the activity center renovation project. I expect that we'll be able to bring forward some information and a presentation from the consultants on that. So there will be some work from council on that activity center renovation project next week, and it may lead to us bumping some of the other motion action list items, but we'll inform you of that. And of course, you'll see it when the agenda is released on Friday. But that would be about the only comment that I have on the motion action list, which again is just here for information.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any councillors have questions about our action list or administration? Don't see any hands. We can move on to item number 9, council reports. Anything to report from council in the past week? Councillor Kelleher-Empey.
Last Wednesday morning, I attended the chamber breakfast meeting, and Wednesday afternoon, I attended the early childhood conversations, which I found was very interesting. We did some breakout sessions regarding financial hardships that young parents are facing within our community. And our other debate was on finding places for parents and young children drop-in areas. What is available within our community? What can be used for these parents to meet? During COVID, it has really come out that there's a lot of mental health stress within our young families in Jasper, and the fact that they need to be able to meet with one another. So some really good conversation took place, and within 2 months, I think Mrs. Riddell will bring the report back to council.
Thank you, Councillor Kelleher-Empey. Any other councillors have anything to report from the last week? No, I attended a library board meeting on Wednesday night, and in light of the restrictions being lifted, the library staff have still chosen to wear masks for the next month, but are deeming the library a mask-friendly place. Won't be necessary once restrictions lift in March, but they will not be, anyone that comes in wearing a mask, feel more comfortable, will be absolutely welcomed into their building. Are there any other, Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. On Friday, the 11th, I did attend the quarterly meeting of the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association. Nothing of anything to directly report back to council or the community from that meeting at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Any other reports from councillors? I see no hands. We can move on to agenda item 10, upcoming events. NETMA is tomorrow night at the Jasper Brew Pub from 5 till 7. Our emergency management training is Monday the 28th. Still determining a location. Our strategic planning session is coming up in April. And an intergovernmental meeting on Tuesday, May 19th. Another exciting upcoming event, I think, in my mind, is potentially meeting back in person with our restrictions being lifted March 1st. Mr. Given, will that be added to our upcoming events?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Hall. Yes, certainly the municipality is adapting as the province changes restrictions. You would have seen that we announced the change of the discontinuing of the REP program in municipal facilities, and we'd expect to do the same when the provincial work from home recommendation or order is lifted. We would expect to transition to in-person council meetings as well for March 1st. And so we would certainly add that, and you'll see that on the upcoming agendas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Given. Are there any other upcoming events that aren't listed that council would like us to know? I don't think so, which leads us to item number 11. Do I have a councillor wishing to make a motion to adjourn? Oh, Councillor Demoda, I think you snuck in on my screen faster than Councillor Wilson. I will call the question. All in favor? Today's council meeting is adjourned at 2:24 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. Excellent meeting. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Well done.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
It was fun.